Welcome to the inner world of filmmaking. I'm your host, Tamra Meskimen. I'm a writer, director, editor, and a podcast producer. In this show, I will interview filmmakers in all facets of production and distribution. I'm so excited to have the fabulous Jim Meskimen, who is an actor, artist, designer, cartoonist, voice artist, and improv master. He's also the son of Golden Globe and Emmy-nominated actress Marion, who was on Happy Days in the critically acclaimed series Brooklyn Bridge. He has also worked with director Ron Howard and Paul Thomas Anderson, among others. He's an all-around talented guy. Welcome, Jim. So happy to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. Thank you for that very gracious introduction.
So I want to know, when did you get the acting bug? And did your parents want you to go down that road?
Well, those are two very different questions. So I would say, I enjoyed performing, and I had an impulse and an interest in performing from a very early age, like I think a lot of kids do, but I was very, very shy about it. And so I didn't actively pursue it. But in school, I would occasionally get a chance to do something, be in a play or a skit. I would write things and create little shows when I could. But acting, as you know, takes a tremendous commitment. And I didn't make that commitment until I was in my 20s. And by that time, I had it kind of worked out philosophically why it would be okay and why it was the right thing for me to do. And because I'd been wrestling with it all through my teenage years into my 20s. Because as you mentioned, I'm an artist. I'm a trained painter. I'm an illustrator, a cartoonist. And I had been working in that area and studying very hard because I love that and respect that too. But I found that at the end of the day, I missed the social aspect of performing, both the audience and working with other players. And that was wearing on me much greater than my designs and desires to be a painter. As to the second part of your question about my parents, they were always very encouraging to me. Both my parents were divorced, but they still, I think, were equally supportive of my artistic goals, which mostly at the time was to be a cartoonist. And I think they could see that I was serious. I spent hours and hours all the time. I was drawing every day. And if I had a free moment, I would draw. And I think they saw that it meant a lot to me. And there's nothing wrong with being a cartoonist to parents. I think it was much more kind of dubious about being an actor or performer to parents than being a visual artist in some ways. Because it was like, well, you can kind of imagine a path where a guy could make a living as a cartoonist. I didn't really, as I say, I didn't spring it on them at an early age that, hey, I'm going to be an actor. Will you, nil you, I'm going to do this. They just saw me develop slowly as an artist and get better and better. And I think they could extrapolate that, well, this guy has a future and he could be a craftsman. He could be a tradesman that way.
Well, it's always great to have a plethora of talents, because you can always have something to fall back on.
Yes, exactly. I've been falling back and falling to the side and falling on my face quite a lot.
Yeah. And you're very funny. So I'm glad that you're, in TV and film. I mean, the world would miss that.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'm certainly working hard at putting a lot of content out. Now I'm sort of, in this internet age, which enables us to talk to one another. I put tons of content. Today was a big day. My daughter and I were filming things to put on TikTok, to put on YouTube. We have weekly shows that we do. My wife and I do celebrity fortune cookies every day, where I open up a fortune cookie and read it aloud in a celebrity voice on my wheel of impressions. And I get so much out of it. And I make friends around the globe, literally. And that's something I don't think I would have been doing anything differently as a kid than I am right now.
Right. Well, it seems like you're still a kid. That's the best part, right?
I think so. I think in all the ways that are important, I think I'm still a kid.
So I'm curious, growing up with your mom on Happy Days, and Ron Howard and Henry Winkler, who are brilliantly successful today.
Yeah.
You were a teenager around that time. So were you hanging out on set?
A little. Yeah, I did when I could. And when I was old enough to drive, I would drive out and watch the shows tape on Friday nights. And I went as often as I could. It was a very special time, as you may be too young to remember. This was a time to have experienced, this was a time when there were 3 channels. So if you had a hit show on ABC, as my mother did, it was seen by tens of millions of people. And it was just this phenomenon. And since it was a sweet and decent and silly and fun and light show as well, it just had all this good mojo attached to it, and they toured around, the cast toured around in the hiatus period, and they would play softball, at stadiums. My mom would play softball. It was amazing. She was probably pushing 50 and having the time of her life, traveling the world. And fans just loved all those people. They loved Ron. They loved Potsy and Ralph and Henry and Tom Bosley and everybody. And to this day, people, when they find out who my mom is, they generally always say the same thing. They say, "Oh, I love your mom," which is an awfully nice little foundation for getting to know somebody. Like, oh, I too love my mom.
Right. No, it was great. I grew up watching the show, so I loved it. Yeah, and Scott Baio and
Aaron Moran.
Yeah. So like, did you become friends with anybody like on the show, or is that kind of not a thing that happens?
No, it definitely happened, especially in that show, because it was a family vibe. Gary Marshall, the creator of the show, created a family there, so the writers, the producers, it was super friendly. And I'm on the outside of it, but from looking, I'm a little closer than most people. And I could just see that it had a real supportive. They were in it together. The director, Jerry Paris, another wild man. So I was definitely tolerated, probably more than I should have been. I got to know all those guys. I mean, I met Ron Howard. I think I was 13. He was probably an old man of 18. And we maintained a kind of a friendship. I mean, he doesn't lack for friends. So, and I was 5 years younger, so we didn't spend a lot of time together. But he was nice enough, when I was in New York and in my 20s, to audition me for a part in a film he was doing. And it was my first film role, a movie called The Paper. I had a very nice scene with Marissa Tomei, and I read for Ron. And so, and he's put me in 4 films after that. So that's a kind of friendship. Now I've seen, just in the last week or two, I've seen Anson Williams, and I've also seen Donnie Most.
Yeah.
And we have a lovely friendship, because it's like they associate that, of course, the Happy Days years with a period of tremendous magic in their youth, and for me too, it just has a slightly different connotation, but it's still a very happy time.
Yeah. Did you feel like having parents in the business made it easier or harder for you coming into acting?
Well, any kind of career like in the arts is a bit of a game, You're trying to score in the best sort of way. You're trying to have an effect on people, and to just to be able to do what you do, you have to do well so that you're allowed to do it. And so when you're starting out, you're looking for connections, you're looking for an in, you're looking for, some sort of an easy way to open a door or two. And sometimes it's not the doors that you expect. Mm-hmm. Since I didn't jump on the acting thing early, Happy Days was over by the time I really committed. I'm a little bit of a late bloomer, I guess. But obviously, my mom introduced me to lots and lots of people. I knew lots of people from the set. I knew writers. I knew a lot. Many people, the actors in Happy Days, and even some of the writing staff went on to become directors. Like many of them. Even Henry Winkler directed. Ron directed. Anson became a very successful TV director. So I did have those connections just by the fact that I had grown up with them. But I still had to establish myself now as not Marion's kid, but an actor who could, do the job. And I always had to do that. And I've always had to audition and do well and keep in touch with people. But I think, so that door was, slightly left open, but you're not ushered in, like, here, come in, it wasn't that sort of imagery. But the door that did open, that I didn't really credit for quite a long time, was that since I had lived with Mom as her son in her house, growing up,
right,
and seen her operate as a working actress, a single mom, by the way, with 2 kids, not the easiest kids in the world. I was a young, kind of full of beans kid, and getting into all kinds of trouble and messing up her house, and my sister was a little more pleasant, a little more social than I was, but But so I got to see how my mom operated and built a career despite the barriers of being a single mom and having, a lot of demands. And it's to be well, I mean, it's insane, really, when you think about it. She obviously had very big dreams and goals from when she was 15, when she really decided in Minnesota that she wanted to be an actress. I don't think that she even had the vision to predict that she would become the kind of star that she became, an iconic star on television. That's pretty amazing. But just to survive and just keep working, I got to witness what she did, and it became I see, and I didn't even really realize what I was absorbing until later. I started to pursue my own career. I was like, all right, well, I kind of know that this isn't about people giving you things. This isn't about waiting around for someone to bestow on you the role of a lifetime or the next opportunity. This is about hustle, because that's what I saw my mom do. She would do plays, which is, very rewarding artistically, but very unremunerative, to say the least. Hard work, long hours, single mom, sometimes bringing us to the theater. She would do plays. She would do PR. She hired a press agent. She would do photo shoots. Oh my God, I just came across an old photo shoot that somebody who works for a publicity company that sells photos said, hey, I wonder if you've ever seen these. He sent me these proof sheets of a few photo shoots that we did when I was probably 13 in our house. And they're the cheapest, nastiest looking photos, flash, big flash bulb, big shadows behind us, just like crime scene sort of photos. But it's like, oh my God, this is my mom. I'm sure my mom paid for this. I'm sure she was trying to make to break out a little bit and be noticed and get an opportunity. And so that's the door that opened for me, was the perception that, okay, this isn't about waiting around. This is about creating the career. And it's pretty much 24/7 until you've made it. And then it really goes into overdrive.
Well, and I think that that's probably been instrumental in the working actor method that you created. Is she probably taught you the work ethics, and that's what you need to do. Is you've got to do it 7/24, make it a day job if you really want to act.
100%. Yeah, it is in my work method, which is a name I didn't give it, by the way, because method is too associated with other things.
Right. Yes.
but yeah, I have an online course in how to be a working actor, how to become a working actor. And after 35 years, I know what I was doing. I know exactly the steps that I was taking, and they're the steps that I still do today. Anybody can learn how to do it. So that's why I offered it. And it's for those listeners that are interested, it's jimworkingactor.com. That little pause there was me going, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to Jim. Yeah, that's right. It took me a minute.
All right. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that a little later. I want to ask you several more questions about that. It's really cool that what you were saying about your mom and how her work ethic, and you saw that and you wanted to implement that into when you started to become an actor, and that it's not just about having a famous parent that's going to open a door for you. And I think that there might be some kids of actors that feel that way. Like, well, I'm from this, my parent, they should just let me in, kind of thing.
Sure. Oh, and I felt that way too. I mean, it just didn't work out that way because that's not the way it works. I remember being, I don't know, 7 or 8. And my mom, she really wasn't pushing me to be an actor. And I wasn't really pushing to be an actor, but for some reason, she heard about an audition for a movie, like a Huckleberry Finn, early version of Huckleberry Finn. So she brought me to 20th Century Fox. And I had never gone on an audition before, or a meeting or anything. And I remember being in the waiting room with a bunch of kids, some pretty famous, and I didn't even know how to prepare. But I had this idea that, well, my mom is now this is before Happy Days. So my mom was a character actress who'd been, on various shows, but was not in any way well known. And I remember going into the casting office, and they said, and what's your name? And I said, Jim Meskimen, Jim Ross Meskimen. Like that was going to, just the gates were just going to open up. And, oh, well, you don't have to audition. Let me just give you the role. Anyway, so yeah, I think a kid may, unless they're oriented properly, may go, wow, this is, I already deserve this just by bloodline. I got this. Now, Ron Howard's parents, I'm sure, were not so uh, so flippant about it. I know that they prepared both those boys in a very professional way. And if I can put in a plug for The Boys, which is a book by Ron and Clint Howard, autobiographical book about their early life, it's just fascinating. And I knew his parents. I know Clint. I worked with Rance, his dad, actually on a few films with Ron. And gosh, salt of the earth is overused expression in their case, but because they came from farming backgrounds, farming families, but terrific people, and the best kind of parents to have if you want to be an artist starting out, because they were artists too, and they were like, okay, well, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be easy. I'll show you how to do it. You're going to have to do all the heavy lifting,
right?
And luckily they were up for it.
Yeah, and so how was it, seeing Ron on set on Happy Days and then being directed by him?
Very natural, very natural. Yeah, I had in the interim, I saw Ron as an actor and just as a fun guy. I knew he was working on scripts because early on, because he let me read one time, and he wanted to know my opinion. It was very, very. It made me feel very good, as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, to have Ron Howard say, "Well, what do you think of the script, Jim?" And then I actually worked for him as a kind of he called me a gaffer. I wasn't a gaffer. I was just a guy that kind of, set up some lights and coiled up some cords at the end of the day for a film that he was doing on his own money, 16 millimeter film that he didn't actually get a chance to finish because he struck a deal with Roger Corman and then went on to start directing, a little bit larger budget films, and then larger and larger. And then by the time I was directed by him on my first film, The Paper, he was already, quite established and quite a few pictures under his belt. And that was a wonderful experience. So, and also Ron is an actor's director. You hear that expression a lot. That just means an actor's director is a director that knows how to speak actor. He knows how to, tell the actor what he needs in a very concise sort of way. That is something that the actor can easily grasp onto and go, okay, I get it. Some directors are not clever that way. They come from a different discipline, perhaps. Maybe they're editors. Maybe they're, more producing or writing kind of director. And they don't often know what the actor needs to grab onto to really direct them. But Ron he's just an expert at it, a genius.
Yeah, and I loved his masterclass. I mean, it was wonderful. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Me too.
So I'm curious, because you've been in the business for a long time, and directors and producers and all this stuff. Do you still have to audition these days, or do you ever reach out and say, "Hey, I heard you're doing a movie"?
I do both. I mean, if I have to audition, I have no problem with auditioning. In fact, it's part of my life. It's the inhale and exhale of an actor's life. I'm going to do one actually when we're done. I feel like I've already done it, but yeah. And now we're doing it from home, so you don't have to drive so far. I enjoy filmmaking anyway, so for me to put up a little scene is pleasurable. And I like the fact that I can control it totally and do as many takes as I want. But yeah, there are those cases where I do reach out to friends who are doing things. And I worked on a film earlier this year that a guy just offered me a role. I've just been offered another little role in a movie. But, I always want to get the better parts, the bigger projects. And those require, in my case anyway, still to audition. I have no problem with it. I've auditioned probably 20,000 times.
Right.
It feels like in that magnitude. And It's like, that's fine. I really like to create and I like to perform. So an audition is a performance. It's one of the things I talk about in my online course, is that the audition may seem like a request. It may seem like you're coming begging or that you expect something. But it isn't that at all. It's a bestowing, it's a giving of a performance. And that's the way you treat it. You create this character, you create this moment, this dramatic or comedic moment, and then you give it to people. And you don't ask for anything in return. You just say, okay, there you go. If you'd like to see it again with the nice lights and the costumes, we have to have a business relationship. But this is this little show for you. And that works very well, because then you don't feel like gosh, did I get it? Did I do it? Did I, blah, blah, blah. And your head can get really wrapped around a pole with auditioning. I've been all over the place with it. But that's, I think, the most successful way to treat it.
Well, and also you just never know that the way that you may envision the character is not how the person saw it, but likes better. And number two is you're making connections, and somebody might like you and think, I'm going to hire you in a different role, but I'm going to keep you in mind.
100%. It happens all the time. They go, oh, wow, that was great. Yeah, we're not going to do it like that, but boy, you'd be good for this character.
Right. So you never know.
Yeah, you don't know.
So you also worked with Paul Thomas Anderson on Magnolia. What is he like as a director?
Yeah, I worked with him on 2 films, on Magnolia and on There Will Be Blood, and very short engagements. So I didn't really I can't say that I got a chance to know him. However, my Magnolia story is that, so I played, I'm in the first 13 seconds, I think, of the movie. I recently looked it up again because I found it on YouTube. I was like, oh, there it is. And I play a forensic scientist who's talking to a room full of people. And it's one of the illustrations of these kind of urban legend stories that begin that movie and sort of bookend that movie. And so I'm a forensic scientist talking about this thing. So on the day, I was not given a script, nor was I given a script on the second movie, come to think of it. But he basically told me what I had to do. I can't remember if I auditioned or not. I guess I didn't, because there was really nothing.
You're that good?
Because I was that good, or they were that needy. I don't know. But so anyway, as the camera is barreling down the aisle at me, it enters the room, goes down the aisle, and I'm supposed to be ending off a speech to this room full of other forensic scientists. And we had a whole room a big banquet room at the Hyatt out in Santa Clarita or something. And all the extras are smoking phony cigarettes, and the place is all looking really 1960s or whatever the period was. Anyway, there was no script. So I thought, all right, well, I'll come up with something. I'm an improv guy. So the line I came up with to end my big talk, whatever it was, and they never did find that shoe. And then the audience responded, and then I began to talk about other things. So I said that just about every time. I came up with another couple of corny things, but that was the one that made it into the movie. You can barely hear me say it, but I do say, and we never did find that shoe. So a few years later, I get called in to go to Paramount to read for a role in There Will Be Blood. And to my surprise, at this early audition, there's Paul Thomas Anderson sitting there. And I go, oh, I didn't expect to see you here. Usually the casting person does the casting and the recommendations are made. But there he was. And he says to me, and we never did find that shoe. So I thought, that's pretty special. I'm sure if we spent more time together, we might have a friendship.
Right. Yeah.
And then he put me in a nice scene with Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. And that was an interesting experience as well. When you work with really good actors, and I've been able to work with quite a few Oscar winners and non-Oscar winning really great actors, of which there are many. And the thing that always impresses me about them is like, they're just confident in their choice. They put it out and you go, well, that's a good way to do that. Yeah. It's nothing fancy. It's just like, well, that's a really good way to do
right.
that. That expresses that character.
Yeah. It must be nice, like working on set with people, because, you can be constantly learning if you're open and just, wow, I'm going to have to try that next time.
Yeah. There's always a lot to learn. There's always a lot to learn by working with professionals and by just seeing how people operate and how seriously people take it. It's, I got into a kind of a habit of winging a lot of things. I did a lot of commercials in New York where spontaneity was valuable and in such a short format for such a kind of a pedestrian usage. I think I got away with a lot. I used to do, in the store, man on the street interviews for grocery chains. Did very well in New York when I would travel out to Texas and do a bunch of commercials, in Florida, do a bunch of commercials, and I would improvise everything. And that has a lot of magic to it, and it's great for certain applications. It's not always best, I find, for a really great piece of writing that you're given as a script. And then it's like, all right, well, let's actually live with these words and assume that these words are not just guidelines.
Right. Yeah.
I've had to learn that lesson, and I have a lot of respect for really terrific writing now. And I try to support that and support whatever the message is that comes, that, the hints are there in the writing.
Now, do you ask the director, can I improv too? Or do you want me to just stick to, how does that work?
Yeah. Sometimes sometimes you need to ask, and it's perfectly okay. That's a great question to ask a director. And oftentimes the director will preface things by saying, now we're going to have you do it by the script. And then we're going to do a take where it's just, whatever. I worked recently with Sean Penn on Gaslit, Watergate drama on Stars. And I got kind of tipped off that, Sean likes to be a little unpredictable. So just be ready, because we might wander a little bit from the script. He likes to do that. I'm like, oh, good to know. And I like that too. In fact, I'd love to do that, So we worked together the better part of an afternoon, and he didn't wander as much as I thought.
Oh.
But we did, it was loose. And we did about a 3 or 4 minute scene together that, it breathed and it moved around, and I didn't feel like I had to drive it, or like it was like you hit this mark. Or the director, also another wonderful actor director, Matt Ross, was terrific and just told us what we needed to know, and, got out of our hair. We shot multiple cameras, and it was a great experience. Yeah. Other times I've worked and they're like, no, you don't say it's he is. Not good day, it's good day. It's like very, very precise in the way that they want you to stick to every syllable that's on the page. And that makes me sweat a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because you can be wrong,
Right. Yeah.
anything where you can get it wrong. I'm like, gosh, the liability of that is wears on me a bit.
So, like, working in off the script and improv, how do you know when to bring it back, or are you waiting for cues? Like, how do you execute it to make it work when two people are going off, just like you were saying with Sean and yourself?
Well, that's the art of it, I guess. That's the art of it. And you work with your fellow actor, and you kind of know where the scene has to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then you try to rein it in, I guess, or not. And and if it just goes off to Mars, then you're like, okay, well, let's cut.
Yeah, right.
That's where that word "cut" comes in handy. Let's take it out, and the director will say, let's rein that in a little bit.
Right.
But it's an art. That's the great thing about it. It is an art. There is really no right or wrong way. You can omit words and you can say lines wrong, but there's no correct way other than what is the director going for. And what does he prefer? Because he's the governor at that point. He's the guy you got to please. So you bring a lot of choices and willingness, and that's the preparation, choices, willingness. With those three weapons, you're well set up to give the guy what he wants and to succeed.
Yeah, and it's just so great that you do improv, and I always think that when characters go off and improv, it can be so much funnier than sometimes what the script says, with what people come up with.
Yeah. I just watched Bridesmaids recently, and that's a great example of that. There's obviously some very wonderful, raw, real, authentic, improvised moments in it that I remember I laughed the first time I saw it. I laughed again the second time. It's like, I know this from doing improv in New York for years, is that there's a special kind of magic that sometimes happens. There's a delightful extra layer of something in an improvised, especially in comedy, I'd say, is just underlying whatever the substance of the scene is. And that is the spirit of creativity, or whatever you want to call it, that adds just extra juice to it. And when in a live situation, that's what makes live improv just so compelling. It doesn't always translate once it's filmed. If it's filmed well, Parks and Recreation is another show I worked on where they used improv a lot. And we would always do, in the scenes that I was in, although most of them were kind of speeches, but there were a lot of opportunities for improv, and they encouraged it. And they would do an improvised take afterwards. It didn't have to do anything, have to do with anything. It could be just really far flung. And there are magical moments that are created that way. And if you have enough cameras surrounding it, you can capture it, and it'll cut, and you can actually use it and make the most of it. It's a nice little spice to put, even in scripted work, to have just some little moments of spontaneity there. That I think that's why people why YouTube and social media things, which are offerings that people make that are very off the cuff, very raw, very authentic. We're starting to get an appetite for it because it's what life is. It's real emotions. It's real situations and real, I don't know, treading water and fumfering around and mistakes and rawness that we recognize. If you compare that, the sort of acting that we have today to the kind of, the work that came out on a very direct line from the theater in the 50s and 60s, television was just like a presentation of emotions and lines, and everything was clear and people spoke very clearly and they said, no, this kind of style is like almost a little hard to watch now. We're certainly not convinced by it. We're aware that we're watching a performance and we can appreciate it on that level, but we're not like, wow, Robert's really having a tough time in the courtroom. We're like, no, that actor is doing a great job at chewing the scenery.
So when you're doing like your TikTok videos and stuff, do you prep for those, or do you just kind of come up and go, let's just play with this and see how it goes?
I confess I mostly just sort of rip them out. We just do them very spontaneously. I mean, there's certain things that I've done some more elaborate ones that are like based on a piece of writing that I've created, poems or whatever. And those I was obviously rehearse, and I use a teleprompter and whatever I can to really bring it off. But most of my content I do very spontaneously. And I think that's the fun of a lot of these things, is just seeing people creating spontaneously. It translates very well to the phone for some reason.
Right. Yeah. And they're short and sweet. That's probably
short and sweet. Yeah. How bad could it be? Yeah.
It's only a minute of my time.
Exactly.
So do you feel like improv is good for actors, and are producers and directors looking for actors to have improv experience?
Well, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's very good for actors. It's good for people. Anybody. We used to teach improv to lawyers and writers and stockbrokers back in New York, just anybody. And what it does is improv trains people to learn how to say yes to things. Mm-hmm. And we all have to be trained to do that, because at this point in our culture, I don't know if it's always been this way, but our impulse, we're sort of hardwired to say no, or to say, and to hold back a little bit. I've been involved with enough classes and seen enough classes to know that you have to take people and you have to say, now, he's going to tell you who you are. Okay, you two people are going to do a scene. He's going to tell you who you are, and you're going to agree. And the first thing the guy does is the guy comes and says, you, Captain, there's a problem with lifeboat number 4. I'm not the captain. They instantly kind of deny it. And we do it out of self-defense. We do it out of habit. But the good news is you can train people out of it pretty quickly. You just call their attention to it, saying, you kind of didn't agree with them there. You said no. I'm like, oh, yeah, I did. Okay, try it again. They do it 18, 20 times. After a while, they go, oh, you want me to say yes? Well, how would that be? And it's like a little nervy, like kind of like, God, if I said yes, I just have the feeling things are going to go bad. I have the feeling that I got a little bit like Jeff Goldblum. Things are going to not go well. They're going to the slippery slope. Yes, the slippery slope. But if you actually get people to do it, after a while they go, hey, actually this works out pretty well. I said yes. Then he said yes. And then after a while we had this great scene.
Right.
And so any improv training you take that fosters that in a safe environment to train you to be positive and to accept things and not to shoot down what everybody else says, even though you think, well, this will be funny if I go, no, I'm not, or no, I'm not, go to hell. You see schools like that too. But a school that helps you to do that will improve your life. Forget about being an actor. You'll learn that by saying yes to things, it's not the end of the world. It might be the opening of, a golden door.
Exactly. And I was just thinking that it opens you up to possibilities, like you're saying, opening the golden door, then working through whatever is thrown your way, because you can do it. And I think that especially when you're on film and maybe somebody screws up, if you can just keep going with it. Yeah. But a lot of times people will stop. Oh, okay, well, he screw it, cut. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would think it would just, and then maybe flow that scene so much better.
Yeah.
just because of it.
Yeah. There's lots of examples of that very thing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So you've done TV, film, video games, animation, and soap operas. Do you have a preference of what you prefer to do, or do you like the variety of different things?
Well, I have enjoyed quite a variety. I also do audiobooks, radio commercials. Also, Colonel Sanders on your TV voiceovers for your KFC commercials as well. And all these things I enjoy. I do like going from thing to thing. I would love to obviously have something that was like a steady gig.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fantastic. I've had that in the past. I'd love to have it again. They're all different. I mean, live performing is great because you're in front of an audience. You get an instant feedback on what you're doing, and you feel like you're actually in real time affecting people's lives, making them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
There's a delay on television and film and video games especially.
Right.
I have video games I've worked on 2 years ago that still aren't out. So the delay on that can be quite formidable. But it's all, I just feel very, very grateful and fortunate to have been able to pursue it this long, make my living, support my family, and have a lot of really interesting experiences. I mean, I worked on Apollo 13 with Ed Harris and Tom Hanks, and got to learn about the space program. I got to learn about what my character in Mission Control would have done, and I don't know. You talked about if you're paying attention, you can learn a lot, and it's true in any aspect of existence that you're stuck in, or a job or whatever. You can still glean a lot of interesting insights and information from.
Right. And every character you get to play, I mean, you get, like you're just saying, you get to learn about that character and what they do, or that profession. You get to be that profession without having to be the profession.
Yeah.
So
doing all the heavy lifting.
The perks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So out of all the films and TV shows, if they could be brought back, number 2 of that film or a reboot of the TV show, which one would you love to come back onto?
Oh, that's a really great question. Well, I worked on a series. I had my own series called Impress Me with Ross Marquand, who's gone on to fame with The Walking Dead. And that was about 2 impressionists who were voice actors who wanted to be taken as seriously as actors. And we did not get to do a season 2, but it would be lovely to do a follow-up to that because it was very rewarding, very satisfying, very creative. Ben Shelton was the writer-director. He's just a joy to work with. And I got to work with a lot of very talented other impressionists as well. And it was just, and it was, I would say about 40% improvised, and just a swell time.
Wow. That's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, it was super fun.
Yeah, I'd be Where Are They Now? I see a mockumentary.
Yeah.
So how do you like to work with a director?
Well, I'm spoiled. I've worked with some really great ones. So I like a director that speaks actor, as I mentioned, that has an understanding of what we need and what we don't need.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. I've done a bit of directing myself, mostly audio projects. And early on, I made the mistake of feeling like, okay, I have this show in my mind, the way I want it, the way I think it should be done. And I hear the various roles being performed in a certain way. Now, my job is, I thought, to get the actor to match what's in my mind. And I learned early on that is a tremendous waste of time, and it makes everybody uncomfortable, and you're wasting what the actors will actually bring, which is their own take on it, which might be much better than what you thought of.
Right.
And sometimes you see movies, or mostly movies, I guess, where the director is that kind of director, and all the actors seem to do the same kind of performance. They all seem like shades of the exact same character. And that's because they've all had to squeeze their way through this extremely tight-knit filter of that director who won't permit any other, expression to really come out. And that's a waste. That's a waste of the resource that you have with whatever actor you're working with. So I like a director that goes, I don't know, what do you think? Why don't you give me your take on it, and then I'll add, if I feel like, it's a little bit astray, I'll let you know, or if I think it's a great idea, whatever. And so it's a collaboration, but there's a willingness to accept what I've thought about. And if I don't know, and if I'm like, I'm confused about this part, then I'll talk to him about it, or her, and we'll work it out and get it to a place where it's something that we both enjoy.
Do you find that could tend to be writer directors or first time directors that tend to have in their mind what they think it is?
Yeah, probably first time directors. Yeah. Yeah, they're insecure. They're trying to control everything, and they've been sitting with the project for a long time too, like years, and they've got it like they know so much more about it than you'll ever know. And I had that experience recently, and you're like, just relax. I got this. Let's not try to make, their impulse probably is to do the greatest film of their career right out of the gate,
right?
And that's unnecessary pressure that they put on themselves. You can see why it happens. And I remember feeling very similar when I first started out. So it's one of those things you learn, but it can also be very invigorating to work with first time directors. And often they have a lot of, excitement and enthusiasm and great ideas, and, they don't know what they're doing. And it's kind of, I work with young directors pretty much as often as I can, because it's great to start relationships with directors early. Mm-hmm. And who knows, they might actually go somewhere, like my friend Ron Howard did.
Right.
And also if they're smart, they're looking to you for some input and advice as well. And so it's a nice relationship.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, with your expertise coming onto a first time director's shoot, they're looking for you for wisdom too, or hope they will.
We're looking for professionalism, I think. Like, oh, he got there on time. Well, that's nice. Oh, he knows his lines. Who is this guy?
2 for 2.
Oh, he brought the shoes that we asked. The wardrobe asked him to bring shoes. He brought the shoes. This is amazing.
Who is this guy?
Who is this guy?
Yeah. So now you're teaching acting. So you have the new course, the Working Actor Method. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's at jimworkingactor.com. It's an online course in how to be a working actor. Now, it doesn't teach acting per se. It teaches how to manage your acting career, how to build it and keep it moving forward. Because it's easy to get an acting job, relatively easy. You can get a job. Somebody that's doing something. You get lucky at an audition. Maybe you go with. Here's one thing that happens all the time: is that I just went with my friend to his audition, and they said, "Do you want to audition too?" And I went, "Well, sure, I don't mind." And then I wound up getting the job. How many times have you heard that story? I've heard that story a gazillion times.
Yeah,
it actually happened to me. My first commercial audition, I went very far. If I hadn't screwed it up at the end, I would have got the job. But there's a lot of potency to first time, beginner's luck, you could say. But then how do you keep it going? How do you build on it? How do you drive it, manage it? How do you build your team? How do you get control of it? Because, actors feel like they're waiting around for an opportunity. They're waiting around for a lightning bolt to hit them, or to get that chance, and there can be years of waiting around, and nobody wants years of waiting around. That's called jail. It's horrible. So in my course, I talk about what to do so that you're not waiting around, so that you can build something, so you can create some energy and get things moving forward. And I've honestly just shared what I've done that I know is successful because I've paid attention. I've kept records. I've kept statistics. I know what works for me, and I know the fundamentals of what, because I have a very different career than other people do. I obviously do a lot of improv and voices and impressions. And, one of my biggest jobs these days is doing Colonel Sanders. That's not obviously a path that everybody's going to go down. There's only a few of us. I've done a lot of other weird things, but the fundamentals of what I did to create those opportunities are the same, I think, for most actors. I guess I should say that it's a series of videos and ebooks. And if you go to jimworkingactor.com, it tells you what you get. It's got a money-back guarantee. And we worked very hard on the videos. And I share stories, and I share the precise sort of tips, things that I recommend to do, steps that you can take. It's very nuts and bolts. It's not just me reminiscing about, my time working on the Grinch or something like that. Although I do mention those things.
Well, you have to. I mean, that's part of the process, right?
It's part of the process.
So what do you think are the biggest downfalls for struggling actors?
Yeah, I think it's just not knowing. It's sort of uncharted. You're like, you need to know what is your job. It's one of those things where, like, if you're a baseball player, you go to practice and you do exhibition games, and then you go on the road and you're in the minor leagues and you're playing baseball all the time. You're throwing the ball with other people. People throw the ball to you. You try to hit the ball. When you're an actor, what do? You're waiting by the. Don't wait by the phone. The phone is always with you. You go to the gym. Like, how do I make this happen so that the phone rings and that things happen? And how can you be proactive? Because it doesn't happen by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most actors don't make the commitment to, because they're just not hip to it. They don't make the commitment to taking control and being responsible for the growth of their own career and of their own art form. So I give a lot of suggestions in the course about how to do that, because, it's not clear and it changes all the time. And then you see people that are like, oh, this attractive young person put up a YouTube video. Now they've got their own series on Netflix. Oh, well, how do we try to, okay, that does happen. But that person also may disappear from the face of the earth in 3 months,
Right.
What about some of the really super successful actors that we've known for the last 50 years?
Right.
What did they do? And in some cases, that's difficult too, because you look at a superstar, you go, Tom Hanks. All right, what does Tom Hanks do? Tom Hanks basically answers the phone, or he answers an email, and he's got a huge contract at this point. But what did he do back when it wasn't a fait accompli that he was going to get an Oscar-winning role delivered to him on a monthly basis?
Right.
What did he do? He must have been doing something.
Yeah.
Obviously he's a talented, hardworking actor, but there's also a way that he's managed his day-to-day. Those fundamentals are extremely valuable.
I agree. So how does an actor get the attention of a producer or director?
Well, there's lots of ways. How do you get attention from anybody? How do people, if they want to get married, they want to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, what do? You have to present yourself to the world. You have to put yourself out there. Now, we're lucky in the arts in that, luckily, arts are still a very wide open thing. It's not like we're making drill bits. It's not so prescribed that we need a special, sophisticated piece of machinery. We have our bodies and our minds and our ideas, and we can put things out there. The reason I do the amount of content that I do on YouTube is because that's me saying, here's my skill set in a different way. This is me telling a story. This is how I look when I do something crazy with my hair and my face. And that becomes my brand, if you will. Now, we hear a lot about branding and what's your brand and develop your brand and brand. And, it's one of these things that sort of means something, but what does it mean exactly? And the best definition I've found is from Gary Vaynerchuk, who I respect. And he says, well, your brand is your reputation.
Right.
I went, I can think with that. It is. It's equal to your reputation. So it's how you feel about things. It's what you like. It's what you choose to wear. It's how you present yourself. I always used to say that it's a great indicator to go to LinkedIn and look at people's photos on LinkedIn. And it may have improved lately, but back in the day, it was like you'd see someone and they'd obviously taken their photograph, by the light of some warehouse lamp or in the middle of a thunderstorm or something. You're like, I guess that's a human being. They have no sense of presentation. So their reputation already, for me, just seeing their picture, I'm like, oh, this is a person who does not care about their appearance.
Right.
And doesn't care about, aesthetics in general. So, and then you see people who are like realtors and they take a nice photograph and they look all well lit and they look like, oh, geez, is that a spray on tan? That looks amazing. And that's a certain kind of presentation that establishes their brand. As a performer, you see great actors like Gary Oldman. And we learned early on that his reputation, his brand was to play these kind of weird marginal characters. He's kind of like, wow, that's an aberrated guy. he's addicted to things, and he's not Gary Oldman, but that character is this interesting. Oh, he's a vampire. No, he's this thing. He never just played like, you didn't see him in some rom-com. Gary Oldman, it would be hilarious.
Right.
You know, playing the funny British neighbor.
Right.
Never happened. Not his brand. So obviously he made choices, and that was important to him. Those kind of roles. I'm sure those early films didn't pay very well, and necessarily. And Nicolas Cage is another guy like that who did these weird kind of out there roles that emphasized what he was interested in. And then we got to know him. I remember very much when Jack Nicholson was coming to prominence. I'm old enough to remember Jack Nicholson in the 60s and 70s when, he was this guy who was just kind of marginally, always sounded like he just woke up, and nobody spoke that way back then. And there was something authentic and interesting and kind of irresistible about him. And that was his brand that he expressed. So we have to find, and luckily it's an art form. So we use our artistic sense to find a way to express ourselves, our reputation, our brand, our tastes, if you will.
Wow, it sounds like kind of our brand is essentially who we are, and just accentuating that and keeping.
Not keeping it here, but putting it out.
I mean, and also I get that if you're wanting to do more dramatic like Gary Oldman, that's a brand too, but that's a part of who he is. So I'm sure otherwise you wouldn't be able to pull that. And then you were talking about videos and stuff, and I was just thinking, videos, for actors, it's like I see a lot of people doing their reels online. But I'm thinking we're in an age where you have to be in people's faces all the time. So you doing your videos about your courses, I mean, you got to be doing it all the time to get people to go, oh, what's this? And then by the third or fourth time, they're like, hey, I think I'm going to buy that, or. Yeah,
or the 90th time. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about how often Coca-Cola is screaming at us about their product.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. I mean, how many times do you get that impression if you're just in a normal town? Dozens and dozens of times you don't even notice. And it's just sugary sparkle water. It's nothing, it's nothing that's going to change your life. Right. So,
right.
But we have to, I think actors, you were asking about mistakes that beginners make, is that thinking that, well, I put the message out there. It's like, I sent the party invitation.
Right.
And nobody showed up. It's so strange. Like, well, you have to send 1,000 invitations.
Exactly. I know it's like applying for a job. It's like you have to, send out resumes to 100, 200 people, and you might get one yes.
That's right.
Or maybe a callback or something, but you have to keep doing it. Otherwise, you're never going to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's like sales.
And that's why I love the quote on your website. There is no reason why you can't make a living as an actor. I thought that was really good because I totally agree with that. And my thoughts, I was just thinking about it, was never give up, keep being in films, however small the part may be, because you never know where it's going to lead or who you're going to meet, and make it a full-time job, getting a job. So what would be your 3 takeaways?
Takeaways from my own life?
From your video, so that you want to just pitch this one more time. What's your 30-second pitch about it?
Learn how to get in the driver's seat. It's your career. And no matter what art form you get involved in, or really any job you get involved in, you got to figure out a way to be the person in charge. You got to be the one who is like George W. Bush, you got to be the decider. You got to be the one who really calls the shots. Otherwise, you're going to, spend a lifetime of waiting and expecting and, being kind of a slave to other people's wishes. And the most successful people don't do that. They figure out a way to be the one causing it to happen. So that it's a big mental shift, because most of us spend the day basically obeying one thing or another. And that has to change. That paradigm just has to change to have a healthy career.
Yeah, I just finished reading the book Atomic Habits, and I really love what he was saying is you have to become the habit that you want to create. Like, you have to become that. So if you want to be a full-time actor, then you have to become the full-time actor. What would a full-time actor do every day, kind of thing. And I love it.
100%. 100%. Absolutely.
Do you want to tell us any other projects you're working on right now?
Gosh, what am I working on right now? A lot of this is confidential.
Of course.
but I have a series that's going to launch sometime this fall. I haven't gotten the date yet. I have a recurring role in a new show called The Big Door Prize.
Great.
It's not a game show. There is no door prize, but it's very funny. And it's got the wonderful actor Chris O'Dowd. I don't know if you know Chris O'Dowd from the IT Crowd and from Bridesmaids, which I mentioned earlier.
Oh, yes.
And he's a marvelous, funny actor. I love him. And I got to play with him. And so that's the Big Door Prize on Apple TV. That'll be coming out. Also have an episode of a show called Welcome to Chippendales, about the Chippendales dancers, how that all started. Play Phil Donahue.
Oh, wow.
The talk show host, Phil Donahue. So that was fun. I got to see those guys shaking their buns. What can I tell you? Mm-hmm. And then I also played a nice character. I can't say too much about it in an upcoming, season 2, I think, of Hunters, that HBO series, the Al Pacino Nazi hunting show. I got to play a very nice role in that. So that's all coming out this fall. And then I'm auditioning. I'm looking for the next big thing.
That's great. By the way, just on that note, how do you manage all the different projects? Is it just a time thing? Like, can you say yes? Because it seems like, you have to go after your next gig while you got a gig, but then how do you manage the timing and scheduling?
Well, that's just one of those things that you have to kind of deal with at the time. And it often happens to actors that they're dry for a long time and then everybody wants them on Tuesday. They got 3. It's happened to me so many times. They go, oh, yeah, they want you on the 10th. You're like, the 10th? I'm already holding the 10th for 2 other things. Like, it's very frustrating. But schedules change, or you have to go, well, I'm going to do this one because it's a better job.
Yeah.
And you have to you and your management, your team, you have to figure out, well, what's the right thing to do here. And sometimes it's a gamble. Sometimes it's like, well, I don't quite have that one, but that they're interested. And this one's a bird in the hand, but I really like this one better. You have to kind of finesse it, and it makes it kind of exciting, but it happens so often. Or you decide to go out of town, and everybody wants that day that you're at the airport, basically. Ugh. And it's what gives it spice. It gives it spice.
Yeah. Well, it's always nice to be working having choices. I guess that's a great thing.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for being on the show today. This was great.
My pleasure, Tammy. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to get out there and make a film. Reach out to your local filmmakers group to get involved and connect. Please subscribe to the show if you like it, and follow me on Instagram @TammyMcGarrow. Until we meet again, what's your story?